Well, today we have another interesting chat with long-standing dentist in our community, Dr. Robert Mast. The dental history in my case goes back a little before I think Bob arrived, but that's as a youngster requiring dental care and treatment. And I well remember that just down from my parents' office and the old Royal Bank building was a chap named Dr. Husband. That may ring a bell to you, Husband and Oatway. It turned out that Dr. Husband was a dentist who graduated in the second class from the U of A and came directly to Red Deer and was an exceptional practitioner for many years. So exceptional it was hard to get into his practice. As you would well know, if you're successful, your people are attracted to you. But the other thing I remember, would just quickly mention, was the first time I went into Dr. Oatway's office for a filling. He had equipment that was driven by a cable, a motor on a cable, and I still have memorized that sound, noise, and like most youngsters, an aversion to such appointments right. As a result. But like a wording from that. The other another connection I have with the dental community is there involves a chap named Dr. Wayne Bratley, and you will remember him as you joined him in practice in the old Parsons Clinic. And I was able to convince Wayne one day in the chair that he should join Rotary, which he did. Yes. And then went on to become a president of the club. Correct. In a significant time or era as it closed in on the 75th anniversary, and I think received some awards because of it. But anyway, more importantly, we have an opportunity to go over some of your background and how you took, or some of the things that you studied before you decided to take dentistry, and then having graduated, you came to Red Deer. So perhaps Dr. Mast, you'd fill us in a little bit on some of that background and educational experience and what brought you to Red Deer.
Well, my early educational experience was not stellar. After grade 2, my teacher suggested that I better be good at farming because I would never be any good at school. And then we moved off the farm from the Barhead area into Grand Prairie. And my father went from farming into construction, and school changed. I always loved sports and was tall and lanky and not very good at sports, and until grade 7 came along, and suddenly my coordination improved. And school for me was initially mainly about sports. I enjoyed that. And then from there, as I got into high school, I had developed quite a stammer by grade 4. And the principal of the elementary school suggested I have a chat with a psychologist who discovered that once I memorized a line or a sentence, and slowed everything down, I could say it without the stammering. And so he suggested to my parents I get involved in theater. And in the elementary school, we only had musical theater. And so music had come along, but it was sort of something I had to do, and sports was what I wanted to do. And so from there, as I got into high school, being tall and lanky, I was on the injury bench quite often. And so...
what sports were you involved in?
It started with track and field, and then went into volleyball. And then every boy, hockey, I skated and could skate fairly well, but I couldn't shoot with the darn. So, and with volleyball, I was the tall guy on the team, and very much frustrated my coaches in junior high and early high school, because they wanted me to be the spiker from the outside. Mm. And I couldn't coordinate my spiking, but I wasn't afraid to get on the floor. So I was digging the ball off the floor and the short guys couldn't reach over the net. So, so I knew I had
it worked. Yeah.
some issues in sports. And so I decided in grade 10 in high school that I would get more involved with the music and the theater instead of the sports. And so it turned my life around again in high school. And finishing high school, my marks were still not very stellar. And so I had always thought I was going to end up in the trades. And by 19, I was already foreman of a crew putting in house basements, foundations, working with concrete, and my back was so sore every day. And after that, last summer, when I was 19, I decided that was enough, and I moved to Edmonton and got very involved in the theater and music scene there. Was in many musicals and a little bit of theater, pure theater, and kept my running and cycling going, lots of highway rides. And then there were a couple of young ladies who I was in a show with who had some phenomenal voices. They could do things that I just couldn't. Chatting with them, they suggested that I get some proper vocal instruction, and I decided to study with their voice teacher, who was a part-time teacher in the music department at the U of A. And so she suggested that it would be a lot more economical for me to study music in school than to pay for private lessons. My work experience involved everything from retail to landscaping to more construction to earn some money. And then on the side, I was having fun in theater and music. And this voice teacher convinced me to go for a Bachelor of Music degree with a voice major as an opera singer. And
so she obviously felt you had talent in the future.
Correct. Yeah. But it still wasn't my overall pleasure. My music was fun, and trying to turn it into a job or a career. I was competing with my best friends for roles in operas or music gigs, right? And it took the enjoyment out of it. And so I finished and did my debuts in the Edmonton Opera, Calgary Opera, and a smaller company that was in Vancouver, and decided that my life of living out of a suitcase was not for me. And so I went into the insurance business and sold life insurance and disability insurance, started pension plannings, did that for about 4.5 years. And the fellow who brought me into the business called me up one day, and he used my theater experience to help him with his sales presentations. He would write a sales presentation and he'd ask me to critique it as he went through it. And I would give him pointers, you're not emphasizing the right thing, or bring this, your topic's going off course or whatever. And so I thought we were going over another sales experience, and he told me how to bring a pen and 3 pieces of paper. I said, why 3 pieces of paper? He said, we'll talk about it on Saturday morning over coffee. And so I got there and he said, okay, on top of the first page, I want you to write down, if nothing were to hinder me, this is what I want to accomplish in a lifetime. And the second sheet was what I would like to accomplish in the next 5 to 10 years. And the third sheet was in between. And I had never brainstormed like that before. And I remember the first couple of Saturdays doing this, and it was a real struggle to get anything on the paper. But he was a little smarter than I was, and he knew that the more I pondered those questions during the week, the more ideas would come rolling in my head. And I look back now, and it was quite clear why it was all medical related fields that would come up. With my theater, it was all body movement. With my music, it was body movement as well. It's a very muscular approach with singing, and how you support the sound and create the sound. And with my sports, all the injuries I had and stuff, I found it quite fascinating how the body recovered and bounced around. And then living on the farm, we never had much money, and so it was always hunting and butchering, and I was always in there like a dirty shirt. I was in my element. I loved that. And
this still isn't quite pointing me, at least, to where you went.
And so finally, medicine came out. But then finally, after about 3 months of this, I said, okay, his name was Bob as well. I said, okay, Bob, we've done enough of this. This is not working. And he said, what do you mean? I said, well, first of all, I'm not smart enough to get into medical school. I'm not a good student. And he criticized me quite heavily, shall we say, and challenged me with the single phrase, can you honestly tell me you ever applied yourself 100% to your schooling? And I sat there, and he said, do you know what I mean? And I said, no. And he said, well, don't tell me you're no good at school until you can prove it to yourself. And so I went back that summer and in summer school and redid all my high school sciences. Finally passed them and passed my English 30. And I knew I didn't want to be a doctor. I wanted to work more with my hands, and that meant physiotherapy, or I had lots of dental work done in my past as well. My teeth were not great, and I was not brought up with a toothbrush. And I thought, dentistry might be interesting. And so Bob made me spend at least a half a day in 3 different dental offices of clients of his, observing. And I thought, I think I might enjoy this. And 2 years later, I was in dental school and graduated in 1990.
At the U of A?
At the U of A, yeah.
So you took your pre-dental training there as well? Because there's at least, was that 1 year or more than 1 year then?
At that point, it was at least a 2-year program. And so I did actually all the prerequisites in 1 year, and I was permitted to do that because I already had 4 years with my music and a year at Concordia College, where I tried to see if I wanted to go to university or not. And so they allowed me to take all the prerequisites in 1 year, which was extremely challenging. And after that year, I was on the alternate list. And so I knew I was really close. And so I challenged myself with 1 more year of microbiology and such. Plus, I thought maybe I can finish my Bachelor of Music degree, and so I did my counterpoint class and my fourth year recital, memorizing an hour of music, or 45 minutes of music, and performing. And everything went well, but I once again failed my piano proficiency. And as a voice major, we had to prove that we could play the piano at about a grade 5 to 7 level. And the head of the piano department at the time said, "Robert, not good enough. I expect more from you." And I said, "But you're allowing everyone else through. Why not me?" She said, "Because I expect more from you. You're going to go places in music." And I said, "No, I'm going into dentistry." And she didn't understand how serious I was.
It's quite an admixture, although I think I recall Dean Cochran rather proudly telling the story about the first class of medical students at the University of Calgary, and one of them was a PhD in music.
Is that right?
Yeah.
Interesting. Yeah. I look at the people who are in med school and dental school, and many of them either excelled in sports or in music. It was quite interesting.
So you then went through the 4 years of
4 years
dental training at the U of A.
Yep.
And then what?
Between our third and fourth year, we're allowed a temporary license to do basic dentistry under the tutelage of a licensed dentist in the province. And I wasn't getting any good vibes in Edmonton, where I was, and so I started looking south and narrowed the list down to 5 offices that sounded interesting, and then I skipped school for 3 days and called in sick and spent a half a day in each office to check them out. And the office that was at the top of the list was Dr. Bradley, his practice. And
that's in Red Deer.
In Red Deer. And so he invited me to work with him that summer. And he and I hit it off immediately. His wife said we were 2 peas in a pod and we were scary. And so
great lady.
Yeah. And then after halfway through the summer, he offered me a position when I graduated to join him in practice. And so I said I would do that, but I would not buy in for at least 2 years because I just needed a break from all the stress and such. And I ended up buying in after a year and a half.
Mm-hmm.
And bought half of his practice. And that was in the Parsons Clinic. Up on the 3rd floor, it was pretty much all dentists up on the 3rd floor there. It was Dr. Chaffaker, Renee Chaffaker was
yeah, I know the name. Mm-hmm.
And then a number of other gentlemen worked through another office that was on the 3rd floor there.
What are some of the highlights that you recall in your dental practice in Red Deer?
In Red Deer? One thing that I really miss was in the early days of my career, I was with a number of more experienced dentists, and we had a dental society, Central Alberta Dental Society, that met once a month during the winter for meetings. And there was a real camaraderie and sharing of ideas, which I learned a lot from my colleagues. If I had questions, if I had work issues that I couldn't figure out, they were more than willing to assist me, either through their experience or their knowledge. And today, we don't have that. We have more of a competitive spirit, and we still have our monthly meetings during the winter months, but it's more just a CE, continuing education approach, and most of my colleagues aren't too interested in sharing their own experiences and ideas.
No, in some ways that's unfortunate. I mean, it's not something you can legislate or change. It depends on the individuals or the group of individuals that you're with. Mm-hmm. But you, Dr. Bradley, retired, and that created some challenges for you.
Yeah, he retired in right around just after 2000, Y2K. And he decided that things were changing in dentistry, and it was time for him to move on. And so he sold his practice or his half of the practice, to another gentleman. And he and I, on the whole, got along fairly well together. But he had a number of personal issues, which unfortunately ended up forcing him into selling his half of the practice to yet another person. And then the next gentleman was doing quite well until all of a sudden one of his sons ended up with a heart attack. And he was quite perplexed at that. How does an 18-year-old suddenly have a heart attack? And through a lot of trips back and forth to Calgary and Edmonton, talking with different specialists and such, they discovered that he has genetically inherited I can't remember the name of it now. It's a muscular defect where the muscles start breaking down, and it's often first noticed in the heart muscle because it has to work quite heavily. And so once he found that it came from him, he had the rest of his family members checked, and one of his daughters has the same issue, but she's been doing really well. And so he kept on working for a few years yet, until he started noticing that towards the end of the day, he would suddenly get exhausted. And it was becoming earlier and earlier in the day. And he said, I can't have this happen when I'm in the middle of doing some surgery or anything like that. And he ended up having to sell his practice as well. And so the new owner of that half of the practice, he and I did not see eye to eye very well. And he invited me to find a better place to work. And he bought me out. And that would have been in 2015, January of 2015. And I've been working in Blackfalds ever since, and without ownership. And in a way, it's kind of nice because at the end of the day, I get to just go home. I don't have to worry about equipment and books and staff. Yeah.
Yeah, the business of dentistry.
Right, the business of it.
As you look back on your life in dentistry, your years in dentistry, what are some of the major changes that have occurred, and how they equipment and otherwise have been brought to Red Deer to keep it current and to, perhaps in an innovative way to do some things differently in the field?
Dentistry has come a long ways in the last 35 years that I've been associated with it. We take a look at things like the white fillings that we have now. When I was in dental school, I thought if I'm going to be in the industry, I want to know what's happening. And I was fortunate enough that in third year of dental school, the Canadian Dental Association, I'm pretty sure it was third year, Canadian Dental Association had their annual meeting in Edmonton. And again, I skipped a day of classes to attend some lectures there with international renowned speakers. And everything seemed to be talking about these new white fillings. And so the question was on bonding the acrylic resin to dental structure. And in my third year, I decided we had to write a paper in one of my classes, and I wrote my paper on the composite fillings, the acrylic resin fillings. And they had actually been around since, I still remember these details, since 1954. And I remember it because that's the year I was born. And yet at that time, they were, it was like a catalyst and base mixture. So you would stir up the two components and you would plug it in and shape it, and it would gradually set over a few minutes. And then you would trim it and polish it. And they were, the material functionally held up extremely well, but aesthetically it had a lot of issues. The particle size was a little too large, and so the resin filler around these particles was too high a component, and it would pick up stains, like food stains and that type of thing. And so you look at some people who have older white fillings, and they tend to yellow and turn eventually orange and sort of brownish, depending on your diet, you know?
Were these the successors to the old mercury fillings?
Correct. Yeah. Yep. And so I wrote that paper and did well, and was quite surprised. And then in the fourth year, I started understanding the issue of bonding. And one of my professors was really into, he was a young fellow, a fairly recent grad, and he was really into the use of lasers in dentistry. And he wondered if treating a tooth with a laser, and I think it was a CO2 laser at that time, if that would help or assist with bonding, better bonding, or if it would deter better bonding. And so myself and a classmate we chose to assist him on his research project for a master's. And I found that the bonding was not working well at all with hitting the tooth with a laser first. Now, these are all extracted teeth, and we keep them hydrated so that they're as close to a natural tooth as possible. And then we would do our standard protocol at that time. And then we would put the tooth under different stresses and see how well the white filling would stay bonded to the tooth. And I found that under very low pressures, they were falling off. And so there was a couple of our older professors had these loupes. They would magnifying glasses that they would hold up on their head, fold up, and then they would hold them down to check our dental work and critique it, you know. And so we all thought as students, oh, that's just for the old guys. We've got good eyes. We're fine without them. And now I use. I started at 2.5 times magnification, and 3 and 4, and I'm at 4 times magnification now to improve my work.
And so I asked one of my professors if I could borrow his loops for a moment. And I wanted to see what was happening to the tooth structure as I was zapping it with the laser. And I noticed that moisture was coming out of the dentin, which is the substructure under the enamel of the tooth.
Right.
And at that time, the bonding protocol, it was still first generation of bonding, had to be dry. And so, of course, if there was moisture coming out of the dentin, the bond would not set well, unless you could bond to dry enamel on the outside. That type of bonding material worked really well with enamel. And so I wrote my 4th year paper on bonding. And I went to different manufacturers and queried them, like, what's going on? And I found out that there was a gentleman, Byung-Soo, a Korean gentleman, I believe, who was working on a 2nd generation of bonding that would work better in a slightly moist environment. And so using different materials. And so the paper, I ended up with a very good grade, but the head of the restorative department called me into his office afterwards, and he said, "Robert, this is 2 years in a row you have written papers on these white fillings. Why?" And I said, "From my understanding, it's where the filling material is going to go to. We're not going to be doing silver fillings anymore." And he said, "You're wrong. The silver fillings will be here forever. These things don't work." And I look back now and how things have changed. When the head of the department is telling you you're wrong. But I had done all my research, and so I got a good grade because I backed up my hypothesis that we were going to be transitioning into the white fillings. So in about 1994, that 2nd generation of filling material came in, and now we're at generation 8 or 9 of bonding materials. And everything is still compared to the 2nd generation that came out in 94, except it was a very time-consuming.
1994?
Yeah. It was a very time-consuming and precise bonding procedure that you had to use. And so if you didn't understand the chemistry behind what was going on, there were a lot of failures of the white fillings. And yet I never experienced a lot of failures. I took extra courses. I typically had 2.5 to 3 times the amount of continuing education that was required for me to maintain my license. I love learning. After not doing well in school through grade school, my approach to schooling has totally flipped, and I love it. There's so many brilliant people around who I can pick their brains.
And in a field that's changing, certainly the bonding field has changed significantly or almost dramatically.
Dramatically.
From a patient's perspective, we just let the dentist proceed, but obviously...
and we look at other small changes that have happened. Like we never knew much about, we knew about pyorrhea and gum disease, but it wasn't until around 1972 that a gentleman from one of the Scandinavian countries, I believe Sweden, came out and published a paper, if we scrape the plaque and buildup off of teeth, the gums tend to heal and we don't lose bone around teeth. And so suddenly they thought we could save everybody's teeth if everyone just got their teeth cleaned on a regular basis. Mm-hmm. We have since found out that genetics sometimes plays a nasty role in that as well. And so if you're predisposed to dental issues, you're still predisposed to them. And then the other side was implants. They came around as well. There was another Brennemark in around 1954 found that using machined screws made of titanium, if they were implanted into rabbit bone, the bone actually started fusing to the titanium, and it went from there. They were looking for things like joint replacements and such, and the surgeons were not very quick on accepting that possibility, and so
the dental surgeons?
No, medical surgeons.
Orthopods.
Yep. And so he went and was chatting with some of the dental surgeons, and they thought, maybe there's an aspect that we can use in dentistry. And so suddenly it flipped from the medical field into the dental field. And then once it was proven in dentistry, it went back into the medical field and with gusto. And so now research that came from, a lot of the research that came from dentistry became applied to the medical field with joint replacements, which is kind of fascinating.
Yeah, it is. And I know just from knowing you've been away a lot. You go to good courses, short courses and so on over the weekends, however they get adapted to your profession. But you've maintained your expertise and confidence, and an never-ending challenge, in medicine as it is in dentistry, to keep up to date.
Yeah. Yeah, there are a couple of people in dentistry who really, or a couple of things in dentistry that really brought me into wanting to study more. And the first one was getting involved with an organization called the American Academy of Aesthetic or Cosmetic Dentistry. And as cosmetics started becoming more popular, I wanted to learn more about porcelains and all of those lovely things. And then from there, I had a lovely lady who had a long bridge, lower bridge, that the longer the span of the bridge, the more flexure, and the back tooth actually snapped off at the gum line. And so she was going to lose all her back molars on that side, that one side. And she said, "What can I do? I don't want to wear a denture." And I said, "Well, the only other option is implants, so I'll refer you to a surgeon to get some implants placed, and then we'll put a bridge on there again." And she said, "You're my dentist. Why aren't you doing them?" I said, "Do you know how much more training that is going to take?" So after a year of upgrading my training in that field, I decided I was ready to place implants for her. And it was a rather complicated surgery, working around the nerve, and we didn't have 3D scans yet at that time, just over 20 years ago. And so I was, in a sense, winging it, but I had done a lot of study on it and spoken with several experts in it on how to plan everything properly. And she still has them. And a couple of years later, the same thing happened on the other side. She said, "Well, you know what you got to do." And so she said that she would wait till my training was done and be my first patient. But she said, "I want to be your first patient." And she was. And marvelous lady, brought me into the next generation of dentistry, in a sense.
Those highlight cases are easy to remember,
yes,
long remembered, especially if they go well. Bob, you have, partly, I guess, because of your musical and dramatic background and experience and enjoyments, certainly in the Red Deer community, you become actively involved in extracurricular activities well beyond dentistry. In fact, I don't know where you find the time to fit it all in, and including your sports activities. But you want to just give us a few highlights of some of those?
Well, I came here, and there were a few people who had known me through music, and so in the early or mid-90s, I sang the bass solos in the Messiah with the Red Deer Symphony, and I was involved in the last 3 musical theater productions with Cat and
The Central Alberta Theatre.
Central Alberta Theatre, and marvelous experiences. And I've been running all the way through. I was almost an inaugural member of the Red Deer Runners and Red Deer Running Club. And I knew they were forming, but I was new to town, and so I wasn't in the group yet as such. And so just a couple of months after they formed, I said, "So have you got your group going? And I'd like to join." And so I've been a member of the Red Deer Runners on the executive there. And
that's for quite a few years too.
Yeah.
But you run marathons and.
I've done several marathons and just finished a streak of, through COVID, of running 26 consecutive months of at least 1 half marathon a month. And
I tried the 10K at the Terry Fox yesterday.
Oh, yeah.
I was reminded of my age.
Age does play a nasty role. Yeah. I've reached this summer a new level of mediocrity in my running, shall we say? But
may not get better, but at least you have your benchmark set.
I've been so blessed that I can still do it. Yeah. And then a member of Rotary, Wayne Bradley was the president of Rotary just 2 years, I think, before he retired. And at that time, we were only allowed 2 members of any profession into the club. And there were already 2 general dentists in the club. And so after he retired, he resigned from the club and went down south for half the year. And so that left an opening for me to join, and he put my name forward. And in 2001, September 24th, I became a member of the Rotary Club of Red Deer, and last year was president of the co-president of the club with Jack Panteluk. So
I love the story from the point of view that I sat in Wayne's chair and convinced him to join, at least have a look at joining Rotary, which you did. Then
so indirectly, I can thank you for.
Well, I didn't have to raise it again. As that story unfolded.
Yeah.
No, the interesting part about Rotary is at least the downtown club, because there are now three clubs in town.
Yes.
Plus a youth program. Mm-hmm. Is that the downtown club reaches
100th anniversary in February. Yeah.
With a long list of accomplishments and contributions to the community.
Yeah.
Which we'll have to find a way of highlighting in some fashion. So.
Yeah. No, I was brought up in a family that we had to give back to our community, and I have been given lots from the communities that I've been living in, and so giving back was sort of second nature. And then I took a look at what different groups were doing in town, and the downtown group was doing some of the biggest projects and had some influential people in town here. And I thought, for both advancing my career in dentistry and for giving back to my community locally and at large. Becoming a member was going to be very important. Yeah.
When I know how respected you are in the club and how much they enjoy your multi-talents, not just at the podium, but at the vocal level as well.
Yeah. It's still on stage.
They very much need you. Not that there aren't enough ladies in the club yet.
Right.
To make it sound shareable.
Right. Yeah. I always get told that I was missed if I wasn't there to lead the national anthem.
Well, you'll have to change the words to it now.
Correct.
Given the recent changes in our
Yes.
in our monarch.
Yes. Yeah.
Bob, this has been a privilege. It's nice to meet you, not just from laying horizontal and having you operate on me, but
it's far less strenuous being able to see you eye to eye level like this.
And enjoyable too.
Very enjoyable.
Thank you very much for joining us and sharing your life story and the many talents, more than I had realized, that you have to share and are actively sharing them. So
thank you so very much, Bob.
It's nice from a personal and professional point of view, as well as an avocational one, to have spent time with you and enjoyed you, and more so today too. So thank you very much.
Thank you.